Welcome to Scaling the Well, the podcast to elevate your view.
Hello, this is Brian P., and welcome to Scaling the Well. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Scaling the Well Podcast, on my website at scalingthewell.com, and on Facebook at Scaling the Well. So I'm actually in Las Vegas, Nevada, and taking a little bit of a vacation. Tracy, my wife, is at a conference, and she wanted me to come with. So, I took some days off work, and here I am. I got a beautiful view over the Bellagio fountains. I'm staying at the Vdara Hotel. Instead of just going down and gambling and drinking, I decided maybe I should try to be a little bit productive and get some use out of my time, off work. So I'm going to do a podcast for you guys. And I had a couple of topics that I wanted to go over, but as I'm gazing out, it's a beautiful day here. It was about 92 degrees right now outside. It's a clear day. I see the High Roller, as I said, the Bellagio fountains. But I'm also staring across. If you look over the Bellagio from where my room is, I'm staring right at the Trump Hotel. The big Trump emblem is staring me pretty much at eye level. So I was like, you know what? I haven't really talked about this. I've kind of stayed away from it, but I ain't scared. I ain't scared, y'all. I'll fight for you guys. And I'm going to talk about politics today. I'm not going to go into a whole lot about how you should think because, as you'll see, one of my philosophies is you should never determine how another person thinks. But this podcast is about how to do politics right. And yes, I do believe there is a right way and a wrong way to discuss politics, to think about politics, to even deliberate when it comes to voting. And I just think it's just a methodology to where you can break down your thought patterns in a way to where it's not so controversial, and a lot of people think politics is confusing. It's really not. Politics is like anything else in life. It's it's an essential function of the way our country works. It's the way any country works. Even if you're in a dictatorship, there's still politics. There's politics at your job. There's politics in your family. So I think that it's something that's worth discussing. And so let's just start off with me. I like to be open. As I've said before on the podcast, I grew up in a pretty liberal family. I'm a child of adoption. I was adopted at around a year old. I think it was 11 months officially, but I was in foster care for the first year of my life. And my parents, well, especially my mother, I would say she's extremely liberal. But the thing is we'll get into labels later. I'll talk about that. But I guess, most people in the United States would probably consider her liberal. I would also say that there's places in the world, places in Europe where she'd be pretty much center, considered a centrist. But we went to a Unitarian church. My mother actually founded a Unitarian church in the high desert, and we were always about social justice before it became a meme. We believe that people have rights and rights that are shouldn't be trampled on by tyranny. We believe that people are equal. We believe that we don't believe that there should be a ruling class that that oppresses another, regardless of what that is and who makes up that class. So those are kind of just the fundamentals of what I grew up with, and I think those are good things. And I think, if you took when we talk about labels, if you took the liberal and the conservative titles away from these things, I think almost everyone would agree with that. I mean, if you talk to a conservative person in the South and you just laid it out like that, do you think that, you should have a ruling class and somebody should be able to oppress you at will? They'd probably say no. If you talk to somebody in the inner cities, if you talk to somebody who lives out in farmlands or whatever, I think they would all agree on these principles. And I think we all agree on most principles. That's the funny thing. But we tend to get into these team dynamics where that's where things get to be a little bit more controversial. And they're controversial for unnecessary reasons. I think being part of a team is just the way humans are. We're competitive. But think about this. If you took all, and we could say liberal or conservative, let's flip a coin. And, let's say conservatives, right? And if you are somebody who considers themselves liberal and you got rid of everybody you considered a conservative in the United States right now, you just, like Thanos, you snapped your fingers and they disappeared. And everybody who was left is people you determined before the snap was liberal. Well, that new dynamic would still divide itself into liberals and conservatives because that's just who humans are. We would still find a way to segment ourselves. And, I used to say that about, race relations as well. People who are, unabashedly racist, if you got rid of all the people you thought were a minority, if you were white, the white people who would be left would still find a way to divide themselves into groups and hurt each other. And that's not just white people, black people, Latinos, Asians. You go to Africa, there's strife. You go to Asia, there's strife. People find a way to pick teams and to oppose other teams, and that's just kind of who we are. So if we just understand that first, then we can get into politics, because that. And it's part of my nature as well. I'm not saying I'm above it. I'm just saying that I choose to recognize that and admit that I have, that's a human flaw, And it also probably has some strengths, because when we do go to war and we have battles and we even have things in our lives that involve team dynamics, that cohesion of being on a team can overcome great obstacles. So it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something that we need to find balance in. And that's really what everything is about. It's about finding balance. So that's kind of how I grew up. And growing up, now that I'm an adult, at least I like to think of myself as an adult, I have friends of all kinds of political stripes. I have friends who voted for Trump. I have friends who voted for Bernie Sanders. I have friends who didn't vote at all. I have friends who are socialists. I have friends who are, diehard NRA members. I have friends who are diehard anti-gun. They don't think there should be any guns in the hands of citizens at all. I have friends that are pro-life, pro-choice. And I would say consider all these people good friends. And I know their children, and I know their mothers and fathers, and none of these people, because they're my friends, obviously, I don't think any of them are bad people. And I think that, so like as I always bring up in all of my podcasts, we always need to start with empathy, right? So if somebody has a particular political position, whether you think that's wrong or you could think that's very wrong, you could even think it's horrid. Well, look at where they came up. I don't blame somebody who was born into a very wealthy family and maybe their parents, are industrialists and they don't believe that, half of their inheritance should be taken away, with an estate tax or anything like that. If I wasn't born into that family, maybe I would feel the same way. Whether that's right or wrong, or whether that's the best thing for our society, we can debate. But if you, before you get into the debate, my point is that you need to approach that person as a human being first, and hopefully they can approach you as a human being first, and then you can discuss these things. And instead of this looking at that person as being evil, and then and I'll have a whole podcast on evil, what I think about that topic as well. But if you already go into a debate, or you just go into just an interaction thinking that somebody is evil, well, then the debate's already over, right? Because if you think somebody's evil, that means that they're pretty much out to no good. They're rotten to the core, and nothing you're going to say is going to change their mind. Nothing they're going to change. You're not even going to listen to what they're going to say because that person's evil, So you're not going to get anywhere. And if you think entire groups of people are evil, well, then that becomes a situation where we have these clashes in politics that are really unnecessary. Because we all agree on a lot of things, and the things that we do agree on never get done because we're arguing over the fringe things that, we disagree on. And I probably, if you look at a host of issues, if every human being could probably list their top 100 issues, I bet you the overlap, if you did a Venn diagram, that overlap would be huge on a lot of those issues, across all political spectrums, all geographical areas, races, gender, whatever. But we don't do that. We concentrate on our disagreements. And some of that's by design. And I understand that, if you're a politician, and if you know of politicians, it's good to focus on what we disagree on, because that's how certain people get into power. So you need to understand that as well. I'm not going to concentrate if I'm running for office. Well, maybe I would, because I like to think of myself as a good person. But if there's, if there's 20 things that, my constituency disagrees on, but I know I can win an election by focusing on something fringe that people are going to fight over. And then I can say, well, I'm on the side of this people because these people can get me elected because they have the numbers, they have whatever. Then I'll focus on that. And I think a lot of people do that. Those people are very cynical. I still, with empathy, wouldn't call them evil, because they think that, getting elected is the best thing for their particular community, or on a national level, the best thing for our country. I would give them the benefit of doubt. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe that's naive. But I would choose to go with empathy first before condemnation. And I think that's the way we should all start. Now, if you do something that deserves condemnation, okay, but let's not start there. Condemnation should not be our starting point. So that's just like a little run up to kind of what I'm getting at. First, my background, yes, I probably grew up a little bit liberal, but I also have friends of all stripes, and I like to learn from everybody, and I take you to, before, from a martial arts perspective, you can learn from a white belt. So even if you think somebody is not as educated as you, which is very elitist, because education comes in all kinds of forms, you should be able to learn from that person. You should be able to listen to that person. Stories have power. And if all that person has is their life story, if you listen to their life story, it's going to be different than yours, and you're going to learn something. You're going to be able to take something away from it. And so I think you can learn from everybody. I think somebody who is the dean of Harvard can learn from somebody who is a janitor at Harvard. and I think that's the way we should live our lives. So, and I'll get into a little bit more of that too, because you have to have empathy, but you also have to have a little bit of humility to do that. I know I'm kind of just throwing out a lot of platitudes and just a lot of things, but as always, I'm going to be breaking things down a little bit more. And so let's start with, what is my philosophy when it comes to politics? So number one, I as I said before, the team dynamics, labels. Yeah, labels are bad because, one thing, they're not accurate, right? As I said before, if you got rid of all the liberals in this country, if you got rid of all the conservatives, if you were liberal, we would still break down into liberals and conservatives, right? I know lots of people who are Republicans, and none of them have the same life story. If you want to go back to that analogy or that metaphor with somebody who's telling you their life story and how you can get something from it, no two conservatives have the same life story. No two quote-unquote liberals have the same life story. No quote-unquote independents have the same life story. Everybody has something that not something, but maybe millions of somethings that form their identity, and they may have to vote a certain way. That may come down to on election night, a particular vote on a particular candidate, but that's very limiting to judge them by their vote. Somebody who voted for Hillary Clinton is going to have maybe a million reasons that from birth till 2016 as to why they voted for her. Somebody who voted for Trump is going to have a million reasons, and those reasons are going to be very different from somebody else who voted for Trump. And you can say, oh, well, that person's stupid. Well, that's calling somebody stupid. Well, first of all, that's assuming that you're in a place to do that. You're very intelligent. I can always find somebody more intelligent than myself. As a matter of fact, if I'm the most, intelligent person around me, I need to find a new group of people, because that's not a good way to survive. I don't want to be a king. I think that I always want to be in the role of student, no matter how much money I achieve, how much power I achieve. I always want to remain in the role of student until I die, until I take my last breath. So if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. I mean, I know that's not my saying. That's a very old saying. You'll see it in a lot of self-help books. Motivational speakers say it, but it's true. So to call someone stupid is So it's funny because some people will call someone stupid and at the same time call them elitist. Like, no, if you call someone stupid, you're the elitist. So just think about that. But labels, yes, labels serve the media. They serve is a general way of saying, the left believes in this. What is the left? Is the left somebody who is pro-choice? Okay. Is the left somebody who believes that we should have, health care for everyone and that health care should be free? Healthcare is a right. Okay. But those two people may disagree. You could have somebody who's pro-life but still believes in Medicare for all. You could have somebody who is anti-gun and pro-death penalty, believe it or not. and on the right, you see that a lot, right? You have people who are pro-gun and pro-death penalty. And then you have like people who are pro-gun, but for religious reasons, they are anti-death penalty. So there's no such thing as a conservative or a liberal. We just tend to stick to these labels because it enforces our team dynamics, which, is part of our humanity. What I'm saying is we should try to resist that. Understand that, yes, and I do it myself. I will use words like the left and the right to try to get a point across because I don't have a whole day to try to explain a topic. But I realize, and I'll try to explain that, I'm generalizing when I say that. And it is a political spectrum, and that spectrum is infinite. And I think we should recognize that. So just recognize that labels are just that. There's no such thing as a left and a right or even a center. That's kind of like saying that there's an up and a down in space. There's basically infinite directions. Every direction is infinite once you get in space. And that's the same thing with human thought. And once you recognize that, you realize the ridiculousness of these labels, and we're only using them as kind of a shorthand. And even that's kind of problematic, but just realize that's what it is. Number 2, I always try to give you 3 things to remember by. Concentrate on issues, not teams. Again, a lot of this is about not being on teams, but if you have an issue that you're passionate about for whatever reason, and again, bringing in empathy to it, I can't tell you why or what issue you should be passionate about, or some issue that you're against. I think that you got to that conclusion however you got to it. And we'll talk about, how to reconcile that sometimes, in my third point. But I think that issues, whatever issues that you hold dear, they shouldn't be based on your party affiliation or, again, your team dynamic. You identify as a left-wing person, you identify as a right-wing person, you identify as a Democrat, a Republican, Green Party, neo-Nazi. I don't care. Whatever issue it is, whatever party you identify with, I shouldn't be able to predict based on if you are again, let's use pro-choice. If you are pro-choice, I should not be able then to predict your opinion on a pending tax cut proposal. I shouldn't be able to predict your opinion on gun rights. I shouldn't be able to predict your opinion on trade. But because we have these team dynamics, we tend to be able to do that. If somebody who is a pro Second Amendment person who's pro-gun, and he says it loudly and proudly, unfortunately, I could probably predict on a host of issues where he falls, even though those issues have nothing to do with gun rights. So that's what I'm saying, and it doesn't make sense. It's kind of like voting a party line ticket, and when you do that, that means you're not really thinking for yourself. That means you really haven't thought through the issues. You can be pro-gun and still want everyone to have health care. You could still want to put more money into education and still keep a pretty high defense budget. Mathematically, that could be problematic, but there might be other ways and other sources of revenue to do that. Andrew Yang is for a universal basic income. Well, you can, and I point him out because it's very fascinating that a lot of people on the left are supporting him, but there's a lot of people on the right. They see even some people who are quote unquote alt-right, which is another construct that we made up, support him as well. And then people are like scratching their heads like, well, how can that be? Well, that's because there's broke people all over the political spectrum. And I think that's the biggest lie that that's been told to us and that we've kind of bought into. And when I say we bought into it in our own little groups, in our own bubbles, sometimes, and I'm going to generalize here. And so I want you to understand that I admit that I am generalizing when I make these statements. If you are a poor African-American person, it's very easy for a politician from your neighborhood who came to your church, who is now running for whatever office, it could be city council, it could be the governorship or whatever, to say that your problems are based on, these people oppressing you for the last 200 years. Okay, maybe. I'm not saying that oppression and racism and going all the way back to slavery has not had an effect on our society, has not had a disproportionate effect on African Americans. But if the issue that you're voting on has to do with zoning in your area, well, yeah, there's many zoning laws that were created out of racism and stuff. But, does that particular issue in your particular community, how does that affect you? If it's about water conservation, how does that affect you? And how does this person saying that these people, who live in a different zip code, are they oppressing you? That may not be true. It happens, on the other side as well, and not the other side. I would say conservative. Again, I use these terms because that's in our vernacular, but they're generalizations. If you are a poor white person, you can say, well, minorities are taking your jobs. Are they? Are they? And in voting for this particular person, is that person going to get your jobs back? Is he? Is she? I don't know. I think that you need to look more into these issues and approach it with some empathy that there are people from an economic level who are disadvantaged for a number of reasons. Some of it is just the way we set up our economic and financial systems. Some of it could be on their own. If you break it down to more of an individual level. Some of it can just be luck. But whatever it is, they're probably suffering some of the same circumstances that you are. And you're suffering some of the same circumstances that they are. And yet both of you are on opposite sides of political, quote unquote, political spectrum, voting for two candidates that are opposing each other, both of which are appealing to your fears of the other. And therefore, nothing's ever going to really get done. All you're doing is voting for somebody you think is going to protect you from these people. And these people are more like you. They have more in common with you than you have with your candidate. Your candidate's probably got a lot more money than you. Your candidate has $1 million donors. Your candidate's, chilling, on a higher floor than me in the Vidara right now. Got the presidential suite, and yet you think that you have more in common with him because you look more like him or her than that person who lives, 10 miles, east of you, west of you, or whatever. And I think these are the type of things that divide us, and all of us have fallen victim to that. I was using some very, some generalizations, and the reason I say all of us, some people say, well, I don't fall on it. Well, if you look at the state of our country statistically, yes, we have all fallen victim to that at one time or another. So, yes, let's concentrate on particular issues. And then once you concentrate on the issue, you start thinking of ways, what's a common sense way, or not even a common sense way, a complex way to solve that particular issue. And who cares if everyone benefits from it, not just people who look and think like you. If it's the best thing for the country, it's the best thing for the country, right? And even if it's against your quote-unquote team, who cares, right? And that brings me to my third point. Don't be overly invested. And again, this is really one point. It's about not letting these team dynamics that are so human kind of infest your thought process when it comes to politics. But I just kind of want to divide these up because there are a little bit of nuance between these issues, these points that I'm trying to make. Be open and don't overly invest. Don't put your ego. Politics and ego should not coincide. So if it turns out that you support a candidate, support that candidate because you think they're going to do good things and they're supporting the issues that you support. But don't support them because you want somebody to lose, And when I say somebody to lose, I'm not talking about another candidate that you think is bad for the country, because that could be possible. I'm talking about your uncle who talks too much trash at Thanksgiving. You want him to lose, therefore you're voting for this other candidate. Well, what if that uncle who talks a lot of trash and who was wrong most of his life happen to get lucky and pick the right candidate? That doesn't necessarily mean that you should vote against them. And I see this right now. There's a lot of people who, and again, I'll bring up Trump, and it's like there's a lot of people who are going to stay with him no matter what because they have so much emotionally invested in the fact that they are Trump supporters. And then on the other side, there's people who want Trump to lose, not necessarily because they suffered under him or they're going to replace him with something better. They just want him to lose for the simple fact that their ego is invested in him losing. And I think neither one of those positions is healthy. Regardless of what you think of him as a candidate, what you think of him as a person, that should almost be irrelevant. It's like, what's the track record? If you're interviewing somebody for a job, and the presidency is a job, you look over their accomplishments, you look over what they've done, and if they've done enough for you, then you vote for them. If they haven't, they haven't. If you think that there's somebody who's a better candidate, then you vote for them. And it's not personal. Imagine if everybody who didn't get a job, made it their life's mission to destroy that particular company or that particular hiring manager on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm sure some people feel that they want to do that, but that's not how life works. And so why is it working for these people who are basically celebrities? They're political celebrities. They haven't really earned anything. And even if they do get the job, even if they do get elected, they work for you. They should be trying to impress you. You shouldn't be fighting with your family members over who wins or loses. That's a bit ridiculous. So the third point really is information is what counts. And so if you get information that this person or this issue is good, that's great. Or you support this issue, that's great. But don't overly invest. If you get information that's contrary to what you thought a month ago, change your mind. It's okay. That doesn't make you a flip-flopper, doesn't make you wishy-washy. That makes you intelligent. If you get information that you didn't have before and yet you act the same, that's what makes you an idiot. So, and I'm talking to all of you, myself included. If I ever say something on a podcast and it's something, it could be even this podcast, and I'm like blah 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 blah, and then new information comes out, and you're like, Brian, this is new information. This flies in the face of what you said a month ago on your podcast. Let me know. Let me know if I'm being an idiot. I'll own it. At least, I'm telling you right now, at least I'll try to own it. And if I don't own it, you say, Brian, Back in May, you'd say you would own it, and then I just back myself into a corner, So please do. Trust me, my wife does all the time. So those are the three things. Basically, labels. Use them as shorthand. We all do, but understand that they're human constructs and they don't really exist. Number two. Focus on issues, not people. And number three, don't overly invest in any political candidate or even in a political issue. And if you get new information, be open to changing your mind. Don't try to, don't put so much emotional energy in trying to own people. How many YouTube videos you see, so-and-so destroys conservative on this, so-and-so owned liberal on this. So what? Those are these moments in time, and usually they're debating somebody who probably doesn't have good debate skills, I could destroy somebody who's a lot more intelligent than me, a lot more informed on me on a particular issue with better debate, skills. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right on the issue, right? So let's keep that in mind. This is Politics Done Right. This is Scaling the Well. And that's it. And I will see you. Well, I won't see you, but you will hear me on my next podcast. Thank you very much.